Ось така Україна ніколи більше в історії не буде примушена до сорому, який русські називають компроміс. Нам потрібен справедливий мир, яким буде наше майбутнє вирішувати тільки нам. І світ це знає, і світ це поважає. Поважає Україну, сприймає Україну рівною. Україна, яка може реально за добу зібрати і об'єднати довкола себе лідерів світу.
Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Ukraine will continue to fight for its freedom with a commitment to retain its borders as the country marks its Independence Day. As the president gave a defiant speech to mark the occasion, US Vice President J.D. Vance claimed both Russia and Ukraine have made significant concessions.
I think the Russians have made significant concessions to President Trump for the first time in 3.5 years of this conflict. They've actually been willing to be flexible on some of their core demands. They've talked about what would be necessary to end the war. Of course, they haven't been completely there yet, or the war would be over, but we're engaging in this diplomatic process in good faith.
But Volodymyr Zelenskyy has vowed to press on and continue fighting. However, maintaining a meeting with his Russian counterpart would be the most effective way forward. But Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says there is no planned meeting between the two leaders.
In Kyiv, the mood was defiant, proud. Today was a celebration of independence, of throwing off the shackles of Soviet rule. 34 years on, as a different Russian regime threatens their freedom, their president promised peace was coming.
Today, Ukraine celebrates Independence Day, fighting, defending itself against attacks and air raid alarms. And very importantly, we are strong and not alone. Every day we are pushing this war back to where it came from, to the Russian sky and Russian soil.
But the fight for freedom has come at a heavy cost. In Kyiv, Canada's Mark Carney joined Ukraine's president in remembering the fallen, while other allies sent messages of support. The British Prime Minister and German Chancellor, some of many European leaders underlining their allegiance online. But more consequentially, a note from a US president impatient for peace. The people of Ukraine have an unbreakable spirit, and your country's courage inspires many, Donald Trump wrote. Now is the moment to bring an end to the senseless killing. But peace at what cost? Some fear, losing interest, Trump will force a quick, bad deal. In a video to The Nation, President Zelensky vowed not to sell them short.
Нам потрібен справедливий мир, яким буде наше майбутнє вирішувати тільки нам.
Just days ago, when Ukraine's European allies flanked Zelensky at the White House, that path to peace somehow seemed clearer. But progress is stalling, as is Russia's foreign minister, when it comes to a possible meeting between Putin and Zelensky.
There is no meeting planned, and I am not challenging this. But you cannot, I think, understand what I am saying. Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky when the agenda would be ready for a summit. And this agenda is not ready at all.
If it has any hope of getting Russia to the table, Ukraine knows it must keep the US on side. As a show of appreciation, Trump's special envoy was awarded the Order of Merit in Kyiv. But diplomacy moves slowly. For now, Ukrainians must continue to fight to protect the independence they cherish so dearly. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
Mick, on Ukraine, do you see legitimate progress? I mean, you've got Ukraine saying that it won't give up any of its land, Russia saying a deal won't be made unless it does have some land. It's all a bit of a mess still, to be honest. Is a peace deal likely in your view? How are you viewing it at the moment?
No. I think you and I can't remember if you and I talked about this last week or if I talked about it with Laura 2 weeks ago, that one of the things I'd be looking for is how quickly the next meeting would take place. Remember, Trump met on a Friday in Alaska with Vladimir Putin, and then met either on a Monday or Tuesday in Washington, D.C. with many of the European leaders. Things were moving very, very quickly. They've now stopped. The Russians show no interest in meeting with Zelensky. Apparently, Zelensky says he wants to meet with the Russians, but under terms that I don't think are going to be acceptable to anybody. So things seem to have ground to a halt, and I think that's a really, really bad sign for the prospects for peace. I think Trump believed when he left Alaska that Putin wanted a deal. I think every passing day probably points out to the President of the United States that the President of Russia does not want a deal. And until you get someone in Russia who wants a deal and someone in Ukraine who wants a deal, then the war is going to continue, because right now we're not at the point where I think a ceasefire or peace talks are going to begin anytime soon.
Mick, what next then? You know, what more could possibly be done if neither side will budge at all? What is the solution here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Holly. Someone has to break the stasis. They have to change the status quo. What does that mean? That might mean dramatically more economic sanctions by the United States, an increase in military aid or the use of the military aid the Ukrainians are already getting, thinking about the permissions to use to go deeper into Russia and so forth. Something to change the current status, because as the way things stand right now, you're not going to get peace. Something has to change. And I think the only way Donald Trump can change the calculus right now is either economically or militarily.